Welcome everybody, and thank you for joining us today in the latest Boutique Hotel News webinar, today in partnership with Agilysys. And we are going to be talking about a very timely topic, a very popular topic, and that is monetizing the guest journey. My name's Eloise Hanson. I'm the editor of Boutique Hotel News, and we are an online trade publication. We cover the global boutique, lifestyle, and luxury hotel industry. As I mentioned, today's webinar is in partnership with Agilysys, a hospitality tech provider with products for property management, point of sale, inventory, and more. And its client sectors include hotels, resorts, casinos, restaurants, stadiums, healthcare, and more. We do have Duncan on the call today, who you will hear from shortly. And further details about Agilysys have been popped into the chat if you would like to learn more. So today we're going to spend around 45 minutes in conversation with our speakers today, followed by some time at the end to take any questions from our audience. So please, if you do have any questions, submit these using the Q&A function at the bottom of your screens. I will get round to asking those as and where relevant. And this webinar is being recorded. Everyone that has registered will receive a copy of that recording within 48 hours. And we're always eager to improve our webinars from engagement, from content, and would really value your input. If you do have time towards the end to take a very short survey, we would really appreciate any feedback. So let's meet our panelists for today, and it's going to be much easier for me to move from left to right as per the slide deck. So let's kick off with Michael. Over to you and welcome.
Thank you, and good afternoon, everybody. My name is Michael Grove. I'm the CEO at HotStats, now a Duetto company. We were acquired in April. For those of you who don't know who we are and what we do, so we collect the P&L data from hotels on a monthly basis. We provide benchmarking and insights on the various revenue trends, cost trends, and ultimately profitability benchmarking of hotel assets. I've personally been a hotelier for most of my career. I spent the last 6 years with HotStats, and like I said, more recently took the CEO role just over a year ago.
Super, thanks, Mike. And Naomi, over to you.
Hi, everyone. I'm Naomi Heaton, and I'm founder, CEO, and co-owner of a new hospitality brand called The Other House. And The Other House is a residence club, and what it sought to do is to combine residential style living with hotel service and a buzzing local community to provide a complete 360-degree hybrid experience where you can stay for a day, a week, a night, or a year, which is very much part of our business model, really combining hotel with resi and creating what we say is your other house for as long as you're in town.
Thank you very much, Naomi. And last but by no means least, Duncan, over to you.
Thanks, Eloise. Hi, everyone. Good to be here. I'm looking forward to the session as well. So I'm with Agilysys. I'm the Senior Business Development Manager across EMEA for the team here. I'm pretty new to the company, so I'm about 4 months in, so I'm kind of getting my feet under the table, but I've been in the hotel tech software side for about 17 years through a variety of different roles. So I know the industry pretty well. And Agilysys, we're all about the guests, so you'll hear that going through the session today as well. But our platform is one platform that provides many different solutions across the hospitality business, so covering PMS, point of sale, much like Eloise sort of said at the start. So it's great to be here and looking forward to the session ahead.
Thank you, Duncan. And all the LinkedIn profiles of our speakers have been popped into the chat. I do encourage you all to connect. There's lots to get through today. We might not quite cover it all, and that's why the LinkedIn profiles are there for you. So normally for this webinar or my webinars, I provide some context slides and typically stories that are published within the last 6 to 12 months that all provide the reason why we're here. Today, you don't get to hear from me as we have a short video to play for you. So let's take it away.
When I first joined Watergate, we had a whole series of siloed, very useful technology to support us. We'd have a siloed guest record for our spa, we'd have a siloed guest record for our restaurants, we had data, but no unified view of the guest. I drew a circle on a piece of paper and wrote the word guest in the middle of it, and then had arrows all the way around it for all the pieces of technology to point back into that guest. And I said, this is what I want. We ended up doing a formal review of what was available to us. I had over 25 members of our team involved in that decision. Now that we have a single system, we have a fantastic guest engagement flow through email that encourages them to download our app. The app gives them the opportunity to start crafting their itinerary and truly understand everything that's on offer to them during the time they stay. So they can book their restaurants, they can book their children into special sessions, they can book a night swim. Our concierge team can pick out the people who haven't yet and then craft very personalised communications with those people to see if we can encourage them to think about their holiday before they arrive. That frees up the team here at front desk. We want them to create that relaxed atmosphere so that they're able to communicate with our guests and add to a guest experience. That single unified guest profile has changed everything. Our guest experience, revenue per available guest, and then the success of our business all go hand in hand. Revenue per available guest has become more and more important as a key performance metric for us. If you are creating these wonderful, memorable experiences for your guest that are bringing them back year after year, then you are securing your business profitability. 60% of our revenue is coming through our rooms and 40% is from our secondary spend. And one of our properties, that's got to 50-50 in the last couple of years. When I read the Agilysys report, it really resonated. I think everything that I've considered during my time in hospitality, the guest experience, and how it's our responsibility as hoteliers to consider our guests through a much wider lens than just a bedroom and an overnight stay. It also pointed out to me how vitally important it has been to our business success to be measuring revenue per available guest rather than revenue per room. As the report makes clear, the future of hospitality lies in the spaces where technology meets humanity and in the moments guests remember long after they leave.
So we are actually going to break down some of the key points in today's conversation that Judy highlighted. So that is siloed systems and reframing those that tech infrastructure around a guest-centric model, what it means to create a guest-centric or experience-driven guest journey around a unified guest profile and how that has led to new metrics for measuring success, all with a view as to how that is going to drive secondary revenue. So let's begin. And I would like to begin with a question to Naomi. You kindly mentioned in your intro, Naomi, that you gave us a brief overview of what the other house is, the vision, and what you strive to achieve. But can you please elaborate on how you have redesigned the traditional hospitality model to cater to that more experience-driven guest?
Well, it all began when in my other company I was managing a large portfolio of rental property in prime central London, and I could see how our tenants were looking for more and more service and more of an aspirational lifestyle. And I realized that actually what they were looking for was a hotel lifestyle, although they were staying here for 6 months or a year or two. And then when I looked at the hotel market, I could see that whilst there was a lot of service, there wasn't necessarily a lot of experience, and you certainly didn't feel like a local or part of the community. You were rather a guest or a visitor. So I felt that with the other house, we had the opportunity to start fusing together what the upsides are for being a long stay resident and being part of the locality, and being a hotel visitor where you get the service. And that was really the beginning of the other house. The other house is somewhere where you can stay for a day, a week, a night, or a year. So we're of course working for a lot of different target groups, which I'll talk about later on. But really what we were talking about was how do we cater for these different requirements in a unified kind of way? And we really broke down the offering into 3 different components. First of all, rather than having hotel bedrooms, we provide what we call club flats. So that combines your bedroom with your sitting room and a kitchenette. So of course, if you're staying for a long time, you can live just as you would in a normal rented property. But if you are a family coming over for the summer holidays, we could combine a lot of these club flats together to accommodate up to 10 people. So lots of different shapes and sizes. But also we realized that people wanted to be part of the local community. So what we wanted to do was to create a real local hub. So we have made a great effort to provide what we call a street cafe, the Other Kitchen, and also a destination cocktail bar, the Isle of Monkey, which I can talk about more later. So that not only do you have your personal space with your club flat, but you have your public area with this local hub. But then we brought in the idea of a private members club where you could work or socialize, have meetings or chill, combined with a well-being area, fantastic well-being offering, so that if you wanted that private space, which is also open to private members, local members, you have that too. So what it was trying to do was to create what I call hybrid living. We all talk about working or high hybrid working, but this is hybrid living, and the fact that people are looking for this 360-degree experience, and that they're looking for much more curated experiences. And then with the spaces that we have, and where we talk about how we monetize spaces better, is that all the spaces that we produce could be used in other ways. So our Other Kitchen is open during the day, but then we can create events at night. Our Isle of Monkey can be used for lunches or co-working, but a bar at night. And our private members club can also be used for all sorts of book clubs, backgammon nights, panels, thought leadership talks, but all in that area. So not only do we have distinct areas, hybrid spaces, we can then reuse those hybrid spaces in other ways. So you can start monetizing 24 hours a day. And that wasn't necessarily where we, particularly with the events element, we hadn't anticipated it, but our interiors are so exotic and maximalist and different. Again, we hadn't actually necessarily conceived that interior design would become such a fundamental, pivotal part of the brand. So the moment people walk in, they do think they're entering into a different world. And that's also really important in terms of using diverse spaces and being able to monetize them.
I mean, it's incredibly, you don't shy away from a challenge, let's say, Naomi, and you, like you mentioned, you've sliced and diced the other house, which in itself is also flexible and hybrid. So what challenges have you faced when you're trying to unify all these diverse spaces, and can you elaborate on the commercial value, what this has unlocked?
So the challenges we faced obviously is being able to combine all of these offerings in a seamless kind of way. And really when we started, the idea of having a system which could combine transient normal high hotel stays with what I would say is up to 90 days service apartment stays, and then people staying with us 6 months. And we have 20% of our inventories for our long stayers. That is 6 months or more, which again completely changes the atmosphere of the operation. But the ability to combine a system which could create all those different lengths of stays and control it, plus the fact that we are using our spaces in so many different ways. We have 42 different systems. We went for obviously an open API integration right at the very beginning. Actually, nothing is quite as easy to integrate as it says on the pack, but nevertheless, we have integrated all these systems, and we were very fortunate because we only opened late 22, and that was our soft opening, that we were able to build our total tech stack from scratch so that all information flows from one area to another. And ultimately, our aim was that the PMS would be the source of all knowledge, and ultimately that would flow through to our financial system. And we don't need people involved as such to ensure that this communication flow happens. But that was a huge challenge. And indeed, simply finding the people that could sell medium, short and long stay, because they are very different markets with people with very different expertise, and almost never the twain shall meet. That has been a kind of real challenge to develop. But of course, with tech, and I'll talk more, I'm sure, later on with the tech, it does free up our front of house team, our housemates or house jacks, as we call them, to be able to concentrate more on the consumer experience. And particularly because we have people with us and staying with us for very long periods of time, they become very familiar and they really know them. And then, of course, we know that we have some people who want to use a digital approach, and we have an app so they can do everything from booking, checking in, using their mobile key, seeing how busy the gym is. We have that optionality, but what we wanted to do was to have that optionality so that we could also be free to have the proper experience and interaction with our residents if that's how they wanted to experience. So it's really trying to understand all these different experiences, these multitude of experiences, which I call hybrid living, which all our spaces deliver and also all our lengths of stay deliver. So it really is a melting pot of different aspects of staying in a property that we had to combine to our tech base.
It's certainly impressive. 42 different systems, crikey. I'm sure you. Yeah, I won't comment further on that, but I'm keen to bring Duncan in here to talk about how and maybe why system fragmentation still exists and is still such an issue in hospitality. We heard from Judy earlier that in the video that when she joined Watergate Bay, there were so many siloed systems and processes. So why is it such an issue still? And Duncan, what's the biggest obstacle stalling change away from this?
Interesting question, and thank you for that. I think we can acknowledge that hospitality as an industry, and particularly our region, we're way behind other industries in terms of technology and our actual need and want to convert to upgraded technology and the best that's out there and the best that's available. So I think we're poor at that, but getting better. So there's much more scope for us to be able to improve. And I think this focus on the guest is massive because it changes the way we look at the actual business and how we're creating revenue within that. But there are a number of areas that provide bottlenecks, shall we say, are an issue in hospitality. Obstacles, definitely. Naomi mentioned having 42 different systems, as you say, is one of them. So having multiple systems in place is difficult because, I know, Naomi, you also said integrations are not quite as easy as people say they are. Integrations are really hard. You know, I've been in software, hospitality software for 17 years, and to develop a new integration takes a lot of time and a lot of effort, a lot of hours, and it's difficult to do. And there's all that testing that has to be done as well. So to get a true integration is really difficult. So that is a stumbling block and a persistent issue. But you've also got things like, you know, the wanting to stay with the status quo. Our culture within this business is to just stick with what we know because it works. So we know a PMS that we've used in the past works, so we'll just go with that because I know how to manage it, I know how to work on it, I know how to book a room, I know how to cancel a room, etc., etc. So a lot of people, us as an industry, are very much sticking with what we know, and I think that kind of needs to change because it isn't necessarily right for the business you're going into. And Naomi, I'm sure, will have considered a lot of different options for PMS, and having that system that can manage those long-term bookings as well as individual nights. It's really difficult to get the right platform. Hence, I totally understand why you have a total large set of different systems in place. It's just getting people to consider change is really difficult because we're just so used to what we've got. So change management is key, and I think us as tech people need to really sit with the hospitality industry and say, look, we understand it's a very difficult thing to do. It's scary. You know, oh, is my system going to be down for 2 weeks? What am I going to do if I go manual? You know, there's all those sort of scare factors that come into play. So they get in the way of stuff as well and cause a lot of people to just say, do you know what, we'll just stay with what we've got. It works for now. Yeah, it's not providing the most income it could, but it works. Which for us on the tech side is enormously frustrating because we're like, just look at the possibilities. You know, there's so much more you could do if you had the right software. So it can be a little bit frustrating, but we totally get it, of course. So technology wise, you know, there's always new stuff being developed, always new stuff coming along. But as I say, those integrations are really difficult. The other thing we really want to focus on as tech providers for the hospitality industry is making sure that the people we're working with have a competent and, I guess, straightforward project manager on their team as well who can run that process internally. So the most successful implementations I've done in the software side have been where the company we're working with has a particular single point of contact who runs everything internally for them. So we've always said, you know, sometimes for individual hotel integration implementations, it's not that necessary because you can kind of get away with it, but you need to make sure that people are focused. But certainly for larger implementations, to have a project manager available is, as an internal thing, is absolutely key to making this right, because there's so much to consider and it saves so much time as well. So you can really plan stuff with people. And I guess the other blocking side of things to this is cost. I think cost is perceived, you know, software is perceived as really expensive. Is it really necessary? You know, there's all that kind of thing that people go through. But if we as a technology providing industry sit and go through the ROI properly with people, you know, exactly what your requirements are, exactly what this is going to provide. These are the areas where revenue growth could be achieved by doing this, this, and this. Yes, it will change how you do stuff. But what it means is we, with providing the right technology, can ensure that you as hoteliers are focusing on the guest and the guest journey and making sure that increased revenue is going to come. So it's increased guest satisfaction, guest loyalty, word of mouth promotion. So, you know, happy guests means happy staff, etc. So the cost of things, whilst it's an upfront figure and sometimes looks a bit scary, actually, if you break that down across an industry and a certain, you know, let's look at how long it's going to be before this starts paying for itself, we can do a much better job with that. And I think with where I am today, we do a very good job of that. But it is a block you've always got to get past. So yeah, just in kind of review, I think as an industry, we're a bit poor at making sure we're on the best technology. We could do a much better job of that. And I think we as the tech suppliers need to make sure that people are happy to go through that change management process as well. I hope that answers the question.
No, absolutely. And I would say that that the speed of technological advancement now is so rapid and so quick that it's so important for hoteliers to break that mindset of, if it's not broken, why try and fix it? In fact, we should be trying to encourage change and embrace change. And in the video that we watched at the beginning, Judy referenced a report, and that's the 2025 Global Hospitality Impact Study that Agilysys ran. And I just want to highlight a stat that I took from that report this morning. 62% of hotels prioritize minimizing disruption caused by implementing new technologies over the capability of what that technology actually delivers. So what this means is that hotels are more likely to adopt a solution that are simpler to install, but less capable of actually delivering and supporting those advanced strategies. So I hope that sparks your curiosity and we can carry on this conversation. So Mike, you've been waiting patiently. Thank you. I would like to come to you next, please. Let's talk about the experience economy, right? We've had a question from the audience talking about selling additional services and experiences and what that means for the guest journey now. So Mike, are you seeing the experience economy influence traditional hotel KPIs, and if so, how?
Yeah, so just honestly, I thought it was like, it's a really interesting discussion. We start with why we're in this position in the first place. I think there's multiple different angles. So I think, in all fairness, without trying to plug Agilysys further, I am a fan. But I think the idea of not selling the product, but selling the kind of concept, the idea of, you know, how you connect these things up and why, not just the actual direct return on investment, but why it makes sense to kind of go into this direction, we have exactly the same challenge with KPIs, right? So the last 6-7 years, you know, I've been flying the flag with the team at HotStats, trying to move the industry away, recognizing that hotels are no longer just bedroom blocks. Even your most basic box hotel these days still has ancillary services or still has opportunity for ancillary services. So, you know, we've been really pushing for that kind of idea of moving towards a, you know, TrevPAR, TrevPOR, Trev Guest, whatever we call it in the end. Because, you know, the concept is bigger than just RevPAR, occupancy and rate. Now, from the experiential travel, I think that, you know, that concept itself is just a fact of life now. You know, there's so many things when people travel, they want to do things differently. It's not just about hotels. When they go to the supermarket, they just don't want their groceries anymore. They want other things. They want to, you know, the opportunity to kind of explore lots of other ideas. And I think that these discussions that seem to be constantly part of these days comes back to, okay, that's all great. We've recognized that's what customers want. We can even look at providing the services as long as they fit within our cost structure. But the actual measuring of it is still quite vague, right? It's still, you know, it's still quite limited. Some of it coming back to that tech problem, but also just the general focus. Now, what we've seen more recently is that, you know, many more hotel companies have moved to total revenue reporting. So, you know, we generally don't present RevPAR, occupancy and rate. We leave that obviously to our friends at STR, but we spend most of the time, you know, at the stages kind of talking about the total revenue, the impact of these mega trends within the hotel P&Ls. And actually, it's not about food and beverage and meeting and events so much now, although they are still key metrics and obviously key opportunities in hotels. There's so many different ways of chopping that up. But guests looking for, you know, just simple things that we've removed from their hotel bedrooms, like, you know, if they want water or an ironing board or some of my favorite things that I complain about when I arrive at a hotel, right? And instead of just removing them for cost purposes or for limitation purposes, you know, if we were measuring these ancillary services and actually incentivizing and capitalizing on these extra areas, the guests would actually be happier because they want these extra things. They need these extra, you know, items when they're in the hotel, just the basics. And then you have these experiences that you can offer, right? Like packaging of different experiences that gives that real seamless flow through the hotel. So I don't think it's necessarily a hotel thing. I think we are late catching up on it. I think there's lots of reasons that I'd love to dive into in more detail at another stage with people, because I think there is a whole mechanical problem about how we approach CapEx spending in IT systems in general. We're running basically huge houses with lots of moving parts and, you know, MEP and lots of things that we have to prioritize our spend on, and tech comes quite low down in the list, unfortunately. So I think there is a whole thing to happen there. But the airlines have capitalized on it much earlier than us. You know, you see the way package holidays work. You see the way that, you know, lots of different things within travel and tourism have, you know, they're miles ahead in the way that they pull those packages together, give people what they want, and maximize the revenue output of them. And hotels are still really early in it. We're still trying to flog them breakfast and all day dining, right? So lots more on that topic, I'm sure.
Could you you mentioned that you're starting to see some hotels, be it brands or groups, shift or slowly start to shift their KPIs, and we heard a new KPI, RevPAG, which is revenue per available guest, or maybe TrevPAG, total revenue per available guest. Mike, what do you think it's going to take for the industry to truly operationalize a shift in KPIs and all of it, we move completely over to a new way of thinking?
See, I don't think we're necessarily going to shift completely. I mean, we offer like over 500 KPIs through the dashboards, right? So, and I would never tell anybody don't use 499 of them and stick to one, right? There's uses and needs for it. So I think total revenue per available guest, I've always flown the flag for that. I think that's a really important metric. In hotels, generally, we looked at sleeper density, we looked at segmentation and tried to maximize, you know, the potential output of each one of those segments. They were kind of those conversations, but we didn't really have the tools to do it properly. But total revenue per available room or per occupied room still has its place, right? Because the first part of it is to get the right level of headcount in your hotel in the first place. And then the second part of it is once they're in your hotel, which is the bit that captures in your ecosystem, you know, on arrival, that is per available guest, right? That's where you really want to maximize every penny, dollar, cent out of, you know, of those guests. So to shift away to it, I think that we have some of the mechanisms, as in, cover reporting is still a bit dodgy. I think there's still a challenge around, guest nights, as in recording, certainly in the United States, for instance. I mean, some of the data we collect on guest nights, is totally unusable because they're just not recording it properly. And that's just more of a, they don't need to report it for fire alarm purposes or, one of these kind of things. But the thing that's shifting now is that you have a huge shift towards resort reporting. So that is one thing. Per available guest is the only way to report for resorts because of the nature, certainly all inclusives. And then also ESG, because the amount of guests in the hotel is directly linked to sustainability metrics. And that's been recognized in the uniform system of accounts that is already launched and needs to be in place by January next year. So in a very short version of the answer to that question, it will take for something wholesale like the change in uniform system of accounts and providers such as Agilysys who can actually capture this information. I think we're in the next 12 months where this is going to become a thing, and quite rightly, because we should be looking at it.
Thanks, Mike. Naomi, I'd like to bring you back in here, please. We've talked a little bit about sort of services and experiences, and I want to come back to you selling space and optimizing space. So how are you segmenting your inventory, be it your club flats, the members club, and the F&B, to ensure that your guests or members receive something that they want, it's personalized and it's tailored to their needs?
Well, as you say, and you encapsulated some of it incredibly well, we are obviously segmenting our space in a variety of different ways. I mean, first of all, as I mentioned, our club flats come in all sorts of different sizes and shapes. So whatever your need is when you're coming to stay, short or long, we can provide that offering for you. Clearly, that is what we call your personal space. But we have our public space, we have our bar and our bistro, so that you have that kind of space. And then if you want your exclusivity of your private club, we have those spaces too. So we have those different spaces so that people can live in different ways. And we also segment really by our interior design. And our interior design has been fundamentally important in a way that I had never anticipated. It would say so much about the brand and the fact that it's this rather fantastical maximalism, which, although that sounds frenetic, is actually very chilled. And the moment that people walk in, they feel that they're walking into a different world. But we're also segmenting in different kinds of ways, because actually we're also segmenting in terms of activity and behavior. So it's not just the physical space, it's the behaviors of our different residents. So clearly we have our normal conventional, when I say conventional in a hotel context, our transient guests who are hotel guests. And a very interesting point was raised that you do need to provide a certain number of amenities and facilities to cater for that hotel lifestyle. When we first opened, because we were going to be 50% medium and long stay and 50% transient, that was our model, we thought that we could kind of veer towards the more service department long stay offering in terms of amenities. We found very quickly that if you come for a short stay, you expect to have hotel amenities, and it wasn't worth our while in any way trying to cut back on that. But then, of course, if you are a medium and a long stayer, right, you can see that there are hotel guests there, you start having aspirations. And I think actually, generally, the requirement of guests since the pandemic has accelerated in terms of what they want in terms of delivery and service. And I think also, of course, as we will be discussing, in terms of experience. So we're also segmenting in the fact that we are looking at customer intent and activity over product. So we are segmenting our resident types by if they're transient or medium and long, and we will treat them in different kinds of ways. In other words, if you're going to be staying with us for over 6 months, you probably need more of a welcome and more hand-holding and more embracing because you're here for a long time and you may be a stranger in a foreign land and you're on your own. So how we treat our different guests varies. And just like with our club, we have not just our regular members, which can be local members, but we will have our corporates, our international members, our under 30s. So what we're trying to do is to take our space and better target it to the behaviors and requirements of the individuals. And we want to multi-purpose our inventory, which we've also talked about, and which I think in terms of this monetizing the guest journey is so important, that you use your inventory 24/7 if you possibly can. And really the whole element that we're so popular with events was not something we actually set out to do. We created these beautiful spaces for specific purposes. And then we realized that these beautiful spaces were sought after by different kinds of people for different needs. And that actually means that we are very much combining the local population, the local community, with the people that come and stay. And I do think that that's a really important element, and where hospitality needs to move, so that you don't become this kind of silo of people who stay in a property and go out, but you have no one coming in. It was so much that the other house was part of the local community. So we're really looking at people's behaviors and what experiences they want, rather than just segmenting in the classical kind of way. And the events that we put on, and events are incredibly important, because I've always been mystified since we opened about the resurgence of private clubs, the way clubs really kind of became rather deeply unfashionable by the end of, or by prior to COVID, that it was not kind of the thing that you did. And now we've seen this resurgence all over the place for clubs. And I feel it's partly because people, being probably less office-based and being more solitary, are requiring to have more curated events, and that the ability to curate your own activity becomes more difficult. So putting on supper parties or drinks parties or panel talks or industry leadership talks, or we do backgammon evenings and reading clubs, book clubs, all of this curation of events to create a community, and community is really, really important. And so that aspect of creating a dynamic community which meets and fulfills the requirements of our kind of residents becomes increasingly important. So that whole community element is a vital part, I think, of how you monetize that guest journey. And all these different things that we're doing, of course, give us monetary opportunities, because these events will be events that you may well have to pay for. We'll do a balance of complimentary events with a balance of ticketed events, using our other kitchen in the evening, which we do for drinks parties, or one arm of our cocktail bar, the Owl and Monkey, for lunch parties when it's not open. All of these ways are being able to multiply the use of one single space in order to create more financial opportunities. Again, as we spoke, both Duncan and Michael so eloquently, all of this requires a lot of tech and a lot of organization. But ultimately, not only are you providing a benefit to your own hotel or offering, but you're providing a fantastic benefit for the people that come and stay with you, who are looking for this 360-degree lifestyle.
Can I pick you up on the monetizing aspect? And I'm going to blend this with a question that we've come from the audience, and I'll read this out because I think it's an interesting point and a broader conversation to be had around balancing inclusivity with exclusivity. So hi everyone, we work with several private members clubs, and one consistent challenge is balancing the sale of additional services without diluting the core membership proposition. It's often a fine line between maintaining the exclusivity of a club and slipping into a luxury hotel model. What strategies do you use to manage this balance? I mean, would you sell the same experiences to the membership club as you would your transient leisure guests, or is there demand? I think you mentioned, Naomi, that there is demand from the leisure guests to.
Oh yes, well, from leisure and our long stayers, all our guests have complimentary access, complimentary membership to the club while they stay with us. And that obviously is a fantastic USP and something which enhances the value of the rooms and so forth. And what the way that we actually segment pricing, and obviously some events are complimentary, but some won't be because they will be costing us something to put on, or they can be complimentary, but then if you have the general public being allowed in, they will pay a ticketed rate. So there are different pricing strategies for different events, and whether or not they are events that we can justify an entry fee for because they're so fascinating, interesting, educational, stimulating, or whether we feel they are part of our regular repertoire. So, for example, we have a monthly sub club, which is called The Other Supper, and that is a paid-for event, and our members are really happy to pay for it because they actually want to meet other members, and we have a very I'd say curated tribe of people that come and stay with us. I always say that I want the other house to be something that people feel that they've discovered and that it's their own find. On the other hand, obviously, I want as many people to know about it. But this idea of finding this hidden gem, and at the moment we're only in South Kensington, but we're shortly to open in Covent Garden, and then planning in Belgravia. It's the first property. But I want it to be this hidden gem. But there's certain things like The Other Supper, which are a paid-for event. We might do some form of cordon bleu event, which will be a paid-for event. So it's kind of being able to identify what justifies a price premium and what should be part of our general calendar events. So we have jazz nights, we have backgammon nights. They don't pay for those events, but hopefully they will consume quite a lot while they're there. And a lot of what we're trying to do is to improve and increase our food and beverage spend. So it is a balancing act. I completely agree with the person that posed that question. And I suppose with a lot of these things, it's feeling your way and not necessarily getting everything right straight away, but finding what's popular and what isn't popular. So I think at the moment that would be my best answer as to how we're doing it. And of course, having the private club is a great monetary opportunity in as much as the membership fees fall down to the bottom line. And that's an extremely attractive thing to be able to do. And then we can also give our members special rates within the actual accommodation, because a lot of them are international. We're getting more and more international members coming in. So it's a kind of complete blend of everything that we do, a seamless blend to make it feel like your other house.
Thanks, Naomi, for taking that question. I'd like to dig a little deeper into the additional revenue and that secondary ancillary revenue. And Duncan, I'm coming back to you here. We heard from Judy earlier on in the video that in one of the properties within the Watergate Bay portfolio, they've been able to achieve a 50-50 split between room and secondary revenue. In your opinion, Duncan, what do you think is a realistic target for other hotels to achieve? And from a very logical standpoint here, what should hoteliers prioritize if they want to move in that direction? What would be a step-by-step guideline framework that they could follow?
So absolutely central to this is the guest, of course, above all else. So that has to be the consideration. And Watergate Bay they have a great team in place and a fantastic leader, Judy, who you've seen. And in the planning of the project, I think she mentioned she had 25 people involved in this, looking at how they manage their guests pre-booking, during booking, whilst on site. And that thing she mentioned about writing the word guest down and ring fencing that with arrows pointing out to X, Y, and Z just focuses the mind. And I think that's what we all need to focus on. And by doing that, we'll change the spend pattern on site and fully understand where and when our guest is spending with us, the multiple touch points they have. So there are hundreds of them across an estate, of course. Watergate Bay is quite different in that they have enormous amounts of facilities. So them achieving a 50-50 split now is fantastic. And of course, they can make the most out of their ancillary spend. You saw, I think it's stand-up paddle boarding going on. But by the way, if you haven't tried it, it's really good fun. It's hard, but it's really good fun. So get out there and try it if you haven't. My daughter shows off in front of me because she's so much better than I am. Anyway, but Before that, they were operating at something like a 65-35 split. So the change that they've done to focus on the guest completely has moved that to 50-50. So they're recognizing the revenue generation of that 100% focus. So for a hotel that's, and we're very aware, Watergate Bay has got wonderful facilities. It's in a fantastic place. There's a lot of activities you can book from there. So for a hotel that's perhaps more bedroom strong, shall we say, and doesn't have that outdoor activity, I think a realistic target could be sort of 70-30. If there's a true focus on the food and beverage journey for the guest. And if the hotel takes into account all potential activity nearby. So, you know, in London, you have theatre trips, boat trips, ghost tours, etc., etc. And they can all be added to packages for the guests to be available online in their booking journey, but also be available when they're on site as well. So it's great to be able to have the concierge can chat with them and say, look, what interests do you have while you're here? We can certainly help you with those. But having them online as well, package-wise, is really key. So in terms of logistical standpoints, thinking outside the boxes, outside the room, not the box, but thinking more about revenue outside the room is absolutely key. So I look at, I'm from Chester, lovely city, really nice place. People go there for the Roman walls and that's great. But hotels there have traditionally just been about, let's just sell them the room and a food and beverage experience as well if they want to do it. But there are loads of restaurants in Chester to go to. So hotels are now starting to look at more focus on how they can keep them in property. Can they, they're trying to promote packages. So Chester Race Days, for example. So Chester races are, famous across the country, across probably the globe really, but they're a big spend for the city and the amount of money they bring in is huge. So hotels are thinking of putting packages in where they've got champagne, transport to and from races, etc. But there's so much other stuff around that you can do in Chester and outside of. So you've got the Welsh Hills not far down the road. You can see them from Chester actually, but it's really, really pleasant. But you've got many more activities you can do, such as river trips, ghost tours, the Roman side of things, of course, you can do you can have blue badge guides come along and take you for a tour of those. So if hotels are starting to offer these as packages, what you're doing is having your guests pay you to get these organized. So you're building these packages for them. And I think it's absolutely key to make sure that's part of the strategy going forward. Because it's all about maintaining the revenue from the guests and getting as much as you can from them during their stay. The multiple touch points that they have are so important to understand, because then you can really start to market and say, oh, actually, Duncan Osborne's not been using our spa. He stayed here 5 times. Why not? Maybe we need to market that more effectively towards that person. So, single platform side of things, if you have one data point for each particular guest, it's very, very straightforward in a way to be able to understand where they're spending with you. There are situations such as Naomi's where there's multiple different systems in place, but as long as you have a king database that you can go to and see what your guests are spending and where in the hotel or across the estate, whatever it would be, that's really, really important to focus on. So make as much as you can thinking outside of the room.
Thank you, Duncan. And I'm going to drill a little deeper into the data now, because Michael, you mentioned earlier, I wrote down in my notebook, mega trends in P&L. So I'm now going to pick you up on that. Where do you see untapped revenue potential in today's guest journey? And what does the data suggest about perhaps overlooked sources of value?
So I've never stayed this quiet for so long, so I'm just catching back up. No, in the meantime, I was able to pull some data points up because I thought it was actually quite interesting, that discussion on the what's the ultimate kind of split, because I think that's quite difficult from a profitability perspective. I think there's a lot of nuance in the argument of which areas of your business you want to be driving the revenue from if you have a limited kind of size and space, and also budget, and also the aspirations of probably the demographic you're aiming for. So there's so much nuance in that discussion. But on average, if I just give you like some of these stats, so on average pre-COVID, so 2019. Hotels on average did just under 70% of their revenue came from rooms. This actually, weirdly, I've pulled for the UK and I pulled from a global sample, and both of them are almost identical. Now we're down to just over 64%. Sorry, no, it was 64% pre-COVID. Now it's just under 70%. So it's increased. Rooms has increased as a percentage of total revenue. So what would be the reasons why that would happen? Well, we've seen pretty significant rate growth on the top line from a rooms perspective coming out of COVID and a shift in segmentation. So that will make some sense. Are we as good at applying cost increases to our ancillary services, our secondary service of the hotel? I'd probably comment not. It's probably one of them. But I think the other thing is that we're still just doing things very similar to how we did them pre-COVID, right? We're just the food and beverage trends have been quite dire. You know, if we look across the globe, hotel food and beverage profitability has declined in some parts of the world, like Northern Europe, it's declined over 10 percentage points over the last 5 years. And that again is not like we are seeing costs rising across the proper, you know, across hotels. Food and beverage is not being overly burdened versus the other areas. It's just the revenue growth has been quite minute. And because of that, you know, if we continue to do food and beverage in the way that we've always done it, we're going to continue to see, you know, similar results, if not worse, because those, you know, we have lost a lot of business out of hotels into more exciting pop-ups outside of the hotel business. So I think food and beverage is a good example of that. I think meeting and events possibly slightly victim of, you know, what we've seen on the, you know, the global trends. We said people are really excited to get together, but the way we get together, the size we get together, all that stuff has you know has shifted. But there is still, you know, some positivity in the fact that they are still going forward. They're just growing much smaller than the other areas of the business, which are things like spa and wellness. So that's everything. I don't know if you've had a chance or if you guys have seen it, but we did a joint report with our RLA Global over the last few weeks. It was released, and we do it every 6 months. And that, you know, is trying to pull together not just the wellness experience itself and how customers require some element of it, even if it's just a fitness room or a, you know, some application in the hotel bedroom, even for those that are not able to achieve, you know, any kind of full fitness, to a full-fledged spa facility and, you know, even wellness resorts. So you can see right across the industry, we've seen again this year versus last year, a 10 percentage point 10% increase in spend per occupied room in the area of health club and wellness. Golf just ahead of that, so around 12% up globally. And then if you look at, you know, how that has changed since pre-COVID, those numbers are in double digits, right? You know, so we're golf, I think, has increased somewhere around 60 to 70% since pre-COVID per available room. So they're kind of those services that are the current ones we have available. The reason we only mention food and beverage, meeting and events, golf, spa, casino, you know, some of those kind of, is because that's basically all we're still doing. We're still doing the similar kind of things. And I think if you listen to other house, you know, and there are other businesses in the world. We judged the Asset Management Award a few years ago for Social Hub, for instance, which is obviously a different demographic, but, you know, a similar kind of mindset in that, you know, we want to mix our long-term stay with our short-term stay and create this community spirit. This is what I see the future of hotels being. You know, if we see the mix of the high street struggling, offices now struggling, hotels have become much more of there's an opportunity for hotels to become the hub, right? The place that people go where they don't, if you need co-working space because you work from home, there's a good reason why you'd go to a members club or to a hotel. It offers many of the things that you would have got in the office and more. So I think that those opportunities, I can't really answer directly exactly where they are. What I can tell you is that the food and beverage and meeting and events is proving the point that the trends are, if you don't do something creative, if you're not doing something that's different than just a standard all-day dining restaurant, you're going to be looking at, you know, declining revenues in a cost inflation environment and really struggling to kind of unlock these things. And I think there's some simple things in there. I think it's things like incentivizing your staff to properly so that the staff actually want to be there, and they, you know, half of the experience that we're talking about, this experience economy, is actually the people you're dealing with there. And if they're not part of it, if they're not feeling part of everything, that's one of the challenges that hotels have really missed the trick on for some time. And then there's the other thing about the creativity of those ancillary services. If a business guest is staying at your hotel, they will have very specific kind of things that business people need when they're traveling. A family will have their own things, and, you know, wedding couples will have their thing, leisure couples will have their, so there'll be lots of different angles, and each one of them has this package you can sell them, right? But we're just still a bit slow and a bit kind of tired to kind of achieve those things. And I think that, you know, this, by measuring is the starting point. I think what Agilysys is suggesting here with the the revenue per guest as a good example, a joined up way of monitoring the guest journey, marketing to it, tracking it. This is the beginning of it, because unfortunately, if it's not being measured, the reality is it's not going to really come to fruition. And everybody who sits in the chain above the hotel general manager is not going to buy into the journey unless we're actually able to measure it and plan for it.
Thanks, Michael.
Did I answer your question, by the way?
Yes, you did.
I got a strong view on this.
No, thank you. I do appreciate that. And interesting to see that actually the room revenue has actually increased by a few percentage points over the last 5 or 6 years. But glad to hear that on the wellness side, there's been an increase in spend. And I say that because the next webinar that I'm hosting is all about designing for health and well-being. So I'll be sure to take a look at that report and see what I can use. We are fast approaching our allotted hour, but I just want to give the final word to Duncan, if I may, because some closing words of advice, please, from yourself. Duncan, what are the most achievable ways hotels can use tech right now to monetize the guest journey?
Make it freely available for the guest. Our guests are much more tech savvy than they used to be. I think I mentioned I've got a 13-year-old daughter. Her ability with tech is way beyond mine. So if something goes wrong with my phone, I'm like, can you go and sort it? My point to that is our guests in 20s, 30s, millennials, or whatever they're called, I'm not quite certain, but they are brought up tech savvy. So they're brought up with a phone in their hands, a laptop, an iPad, whatever it is. That's their way of being. So we have to have that tech available for people to use. And I'm talking like we have where I live, there's a pub down the road that you order everything by QR code. It makes it extremely simple. And the young, I hate to call it the young, I'm not that old myself, but they are much more happy to do that non-personal ordering, but still be, have that delivered by people. And I think that's great. And I really do. But we need to make that available for people. So great in a pub, but if you have that in a hotel, imagine you have a QR code on the table. That order then needs to be correctly distributed to whoever needs to make the food or the drink or the cocktail, whatever it is. Apply the revenue to the correct place as well, and then also be delivered on time. And it's all about efficiency and making sure that's fully available for these guests, because they are our future. In 13 years time, 14-year time, my daughter's going to be staying in hotels and doing this, in her way. And it is about ordering stuff online. She doesn't want that personal side of things. So I think that's really, really crucial for us. So it just means that the guests coming to our doors now, they want to make their bookings for experiences, for rooms, for spa, for golf, etc., all online. That's online check-in as well. Airlines are very good at it. Mike mentioned earlier, airlines are way ahead of us. So we've been able to check in online for years with airlines, and it's quite new for us in the hotel industry, but we need to get there more quickly. So to ensure that that's available for the guest is absolutely crucial to make sure this is going to work properly for us. Booking golf online is a fairly new thing as well. So it's crucial to make sure we match the requirements that these guests of our future are going to have. So tech is what it's all about, I'm afraid.
I think the new measure of luxury is making sure that guests have the option to book or not to book, whether you position yourself as actual high-end luxury or not. But that's what we all want. We want convenience and flexibility. So thank you, Duncan, thank you, Michael, thank you, Naomi, for your time and contributions today.
Thank you.
We're going to leave this webinar open for a couple of minutes at the end, just to allow our audience members to follow up on any of the links that we've popped into the chat today. I rather cheekily plugged my webinar earlier. My next one, which is a week today, is called Designing for Health and Wellbeing. We've talked a little bit about design today. We've talked about wellbeing. Would absolutely love to see you there. The link to register has been popped into the chat. And if you're interested in working with us, either across our digital events or perhaps our in-person events too, do get in touch with my colleague Katie. The details are on your screen and also popped into the chat. So once again, thank you to our panelists for their insights today. Thank you for tuning in. And once again, thank you to Agilysys for a continued partnership. Really enjoyed today's conversation, and I look forward to seeing you all again in a week's time. So take care and see you next week. Bye now.